Hello, George. Hello, George and Samantha. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jimmy. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I can't get feedback from George. Are we able to start or we what? I could see a note saying, I don't know whether George is had cut off or something.
Oh, okay. I think we can start. I've seen a message from him in the chat box.
Okay. All right. Okay. Welcome everyone to this webinar. George is supposed to give us a presentation, Samantha. Maybe we could give it a second or two. He's supposed to be sharing the presentation.
Okay.
All right. Okay, thank you, George. Everybody else, participants, please thank you and welcome to this virtual conversation. I hope it will be engaging so that we can learn from yourselves and you can also pick up one or two things. It would really help. I don't know, George, if that is okay with you. If maybe everybody, we could just do introductions so that we can even, as we speak, we could see which angle to direct the conversations at. So I'll be the one doing the presentations. My name is Jimmy Kuvaras. I work for Bank of Zambia under the Banking, Currency and Payment Systems Department. If it's okay, if everybody could introduce themselves, then we could start shortly after that.
Jimmy, introductions have to be made in the chat. They don't have access to audio and video. So Samantha, you can just read them out as they come through. Yes.
Okay. That's noted. I'll do that. Then I'll proceed. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so that is that's the flow of the conversation, how it will flow. It will just help to see how from a Bank of Zambia perspective we see fintech and the challenges that we are seeing and the fintech landscape in Zambia, as well as the products and services that we are seeing mainly being rolled out by fintechs. Then we'll focus, I think the main thing for this workshop is item number 5 on the regulatory landscape. I think that's where I'll zero in on how you can navigate and how you can offer a regulated service and what sort of licensing then you need to get and the challenges that we are seeing, and from there we can conclude. If there's no objection to the content, we can move forward, or any additions that somebody may want to propose. George, am I getting that people will not be speaking for the moment until I finish the presentation?
They are using the chat section for their comments.
Chat section, okay. Okay, maybe maybe you can just take note of that and help me with that. Then in case there's any comment, you can just bring it to my attention.
Right, Samantha?
Yes, I'll do that since George is controlling the presentation.
Okay. So you can tell me anytime along the presentation whether I need to maybe highlight something or something I need to expand on.
Yes, we'll do.
All right. Thanks, Samantha. So from a Bank of Zambia perspective, a fintech really we see as a combination of technology and financial services, where technology has now enabled us to roll out certain services using in ways that previously were not possible. And we are seeing this in peer-to-peer lending. We are seeing this in how businesses or people raise their funds. We are seeing this in digital currencies, even from Bank of Zambia ourselves. Is it possible to issue a central bank digital currency? Those issues are being discussed and are all being enabled by advances that are being made in technology. We are seeing how people are sending money remittances. And now with this technology, it means a lot of data is being generated. And then data itself becomes a business with big data and how this can be analyzed. Somebody who couldn't previously get a loan because they didn't have a bank account, or there was basically no credit history on which a financial institution could base their decision on. That has changed. Alternative data sources are now able to provide what was previously not known. So it shed a one new light and brought a lot of people onto the financial services sector. We can move to the next slide, George. In terms of the challenges that we are seeing, I know I'm repeating this to the converted. That's why I'm moving pretty fast so that then we can focus on the regulatory aspect. But I thought these were important slides just to build up and get a general understanding and share knowledge. In terms of the challenges that we are seeing, I'm speaking to the fintechs, and you probably correct me or agree with me and devise solutions. In terms of the challenges for fintechs that we're seeing, it's building credibility. You are just starting up, so it's a brilliant idea. It could even be risky. So if you were to get into business with a partner, how without any history, it's like a new graduate looking for a new job. So credibility, it's something that takes time, but with persistence, I think it shouldn't be a showstopper. And another thing is you're competing with large brands, the established banks that have been doing business and are trusted for a long time. Why should someone trust you with their money rather than the big boys in the room? Another challenge is lower finance. I think this is especially true for our country. Financing can be a problem. Another thing is data protection and cybersecurity concerns. You are just starting up. Do you have the tools to be able to protect people's data and protect your systems from any possible hack? Another thing, a challenge that can be faced, we see being faced, is how do you keep pace with fintechs for challenge, and how do you ensure you're keeping with the regulations? So this is one thing. I think one such thing that this program helps, because for us as Bank of Zambia, when you start offering financial services as a fintech, you are getting into a regulated space. And there are certain things, because it's a regulated space, because we need to protect the public. If someone is bringing money to a financial institution as a regulator, then it's our mandate and our job that that money is being kept in a certain way so that the public, as a public good, the public is safe and there's no their money cannot, they cannot lose their money in one or another. So since it's regulated, there's certain things and certain requirements that as a fintech, then you should be able to meet. And a program such as this means that from an early on, before you even approach the bank, you already know the rules of the game, such that by the time you're even building your product, you've built in the safeguards that will allow you to be able to offer that product safely and meet the regulatory requirements. George, we can move to the next slide. Okay, this slide basically is saying, how is the fintech landscape right now in Zambia? So we are seeing a number of fintechs in Zambia, and they are bringing. Previously, if you wanted to, if you were speaking about storing money, I think we all knew, we were all just accustomed to a commercial bank where you could keep your money. Now, when you just leave your home, there's a canteen outside where you can keep your money. It's not brick and mortar. You can access your money anytime. And now with the, if you try right now, if you try to send, if you, let's say you are on a network, let's say you're on MTN money, now you can send money to Airtel. We are seeing a lot of collaborations between institutions. You can deposit money on a mobile money provider, but you're using another service like Kazang or Sigret. So we are seeing a lot of interoperability between a number of financial institutions. You can send money from your bank to a wallet. You can send from a wallet to a bank. You can deposit money in a bank account using Sigret, using Kazang. So all such, that interoperability now allows, it speaks to access and increase financial inclusion. If I'm in an area where my bank is not present, it means that now I can access that service even if my bank is not there because of partnerships between organizations. And if you are a new entrant onto the market, you haven't yet expanded your agent network to reach all the corners of Zambia. Now, because of interoperability that's been enabled by a project called the National Financial Switch, being run by Zambia Electronic Clearing House Limited, you don't have to be everywhere to offer those services there. Once you are connected through those partnerships and that interface, you can reach an area where you're not there. And the idea there is to increase financial inclusion, both in terms of access as well as usage. You're now able to use the service, access because now it's all over, and usage because you're using a shared infrastructure. The cost will go down, and then this will make it affordable for most of our people to access these services. Thank you, George. We can move to the next slide. So the stats, I use the stats for, these were UNCDF. I'm sure there's a new, Samantha, you help me with that. I haven't completed the report on the latest. This number has increased in terms of the number of fintechs in Zambia. And the sectors that we're seeing this fintechs in is pay-as-you-go, solar, health, education, agriculture, financial services as well. So the number of fintechs continue to increase. The number should be very much higher than the figure that's quoted there. I'm sure in the UNCDF 2019 report, that number is much higher. Thank you, George. We can go to the next slide. Okay, this is a continuation. So the different type of services that we are seeing being provided, person to person, person to government, We're seeing taxes being paid using digital financial services, bulk payments. Right now, in the era of COVID, we're seeing a lot of NGOs that supporting the needy people in our society use a number of these methods. We don't have previously. You hear of government officers having to travel distances, going to provincial centers right in the bush to give welfare support programs in cash, but that doesn't have to happen because of the services that your institutions are able to provide. So it's a benefit to the economy, it's a benefit to the people. It's something that should be supported, that is being supported at all levels. Thank you, George. We can move to the next slide. This is a continuation of the fintech landscape in Zambia. I think I've already spoken to most issues here. It's providing accessibility to people and also convenience. I don't have to line up to pay a ZESCO bill. I remember not so long ago when ZESCO just brought the prepaid tokens. It was an achievement just to buy ZESCO units. But now I think, when you get used, now you're just buying on the phone. You sort of forget and you think like that's how it was. But these are the benefits that come with technology. Thank you, George. We can move to the next slide. This slide, it shows movements between 2016 and 2018. The basic message in this slide is just showing how digital financial services have grown, and the comparison was done with bank accounts, where we noted that as at 30 September this year, the number of active wallets, not just number of wallets, but active, meaning a wallet that's been used within the past 90 days, grew to around 8 million. And that is above the number of deposit bank accounts. As of December 2016, the number grew from 6 million to about 13 million registered wallets as of 2018. So you could see that, and those are registered wallets, but you see that activity is much lower because not all registered users are always active. So that's a challenge to providers as well. How do we turn these registered users onto the system? So that's a potential market. They could be registered, but they're not using the service. I think point to take from there is that the number of mobile wallets, which is one of the significant digital financial services, keeps increasing and has surpassed the number of deposit bank accounts. Thank you, George. We can move on. Okay, so here the question is, what has changed with the coming in of fintechs and the provision of these digital financial services? What has changed and what possibly needs to be done? So partnerships have grown. It wasn't always the case. At the first instance, when, for example, mobile money just came into the country, at first, I think not everybody understood that it's a regulated service. So a number of people erroneously thought that the mobile money providers were coming in to offer services and financial services when they're not licensed, but when in fact they were licensed to offer these services. And then naturally, when new entrants come in, you see a lot of pushback from the incumbents who feel like now the new entrant is coming to get a piece of their cake. But what has stand out actually now, if you look at the mobile money providers or the digital financial service providers, fintechs, the target market really is people who previously could not have a bank account, were not interested in keeping their money in a bank account. Now, once these people are converted and they're brought onto the formal financial sector. You're actually seeing, instead of sharing a cake that was small in the beginning, now there's a bigger cake, and that money, through the regulations, that money is still being kept in the banking system. So now the cake has even grown big, and the fight back now is no longer necessary, and that's why you're seeing a lot of partnerships between various service providers. Because if I was in Soweto, let's say 10 years ago, there was no booth, but now there's a booth, and the person that's providing that financial service in that booth, that provider will keep money in, we need to keep money in a holding account. So there's an ecosystem and chain now where these service providers are now working together and seeing value in that. The fintechs are now bringing on more customers onto the formal financial system. So in many cases, you find mobile money actually becomes a sort of first step for somebody to get into the formal financial system. So first they have a wallet, and then before you know it, they start even considering having a bank account. So there's a lot of win-win relationships that's developing. Another thing that's changing now is you're now seeing a lot of second generation products. Previously, what was happening is it was basic P2P. I send money to someone, they cash out, they buy something. Now you're seeing other added services. You're seeing solar services. You're seeing digital credit. People who couldn't get any loan previously now being able to get a loan via mobile money, and the partner organizations that provide these monies. There's a lot of customer education with any new technology when it comes in, or anything that receives traction on the market. You find there'll be crooks that come. So customer education is really important so that our people get safeguarded. And while I'm just speaking about the customer education efforts, you note a lot of the frauds that keep happening with DFS is really a matter of knowledge on the part of the victim. Somebody giving up their ID or giving up their personal information, and in the end they get defrauded. So that's something that's being addressed and needs to continue to be addressed by all stakeholders. Expansion of agent networks. You see, for a sector like mobile money as an example, you find the agent is the front end. That's what the people see. Sometimes the mechanics behind, they will not know them. So this is it's a very an agent is a very key stakeholder that needs to be managed properly, because they're the ones that meet the customer. They're the ones that onboard the customer. They're the ones that are providing the service to the customer. And so once you get it right there, and you do so, but that has improved greatly, and the number of agents or the players they've increased them substantially, and the interoperability now will even make this grow further. We can move to the next slide, George. Okay, so these are some of the challenges that we see being faced by the service providers. One, I think I already hinted to this, is customer dormancy. You see the number of registered users could be about 18 million, but the ones who are actually active it goes to about 8 million. So while the number of active customers has impressed and increased tremendously, but there's still a lot of work to be done, because that's still almost like half of the registered customers who are active. So there's a market out there, and the challenge now, how do you turn that potential market into actual customers who are using the service? Another challenge that we can speak about is agent networks. I'm sure some of you have gone to an agent and it tells you it doesn't have liquidity, either it doesn't have cash or it doesn't have float, so it can't save you. And that, once a customer has an experience like that, it sorts of discourages them, because it's that experience that will send the message out there, no, I've used this service, try this, but if they are turned back, then that will not help. So there's need for a lot of agents, and providers need to find means. How do we support our agents in terms of liquidity? What sort of training do they need to understand? How can they forecast, or how do they know their clientele needs, and how do we help them to meet that those liquidity challenges that they may face in certain instances? We've seen, to address this, some organizations do partnerships. Others, they have a super agent that looks after the smaller agents. So there's a number of ways that this can be done, and so that the service reaches their customers. In terms of infrastructure challenge, this is network. Maybe a network is down, electricity supply. So those are challenges, but there's been improvement in this in infrastructure. There's a report that was done by the World Bank. They call it the Digital Economy Diagnostic Report. That report you've seen a lot of fiber network being laid all over the country. So towers being laid out by Zicta. So there's been improvement in this sector. It's a challenge, but there's been a significant improvement. Financial capability. This is also another challenge that was picked up by the Digital Economy Diagnostic Report produced by the World Bank. A number of people, I spoke to fraud earlier. The sort of fraud that you see, somebody revealing their ID, somebody revealing their personal information, they just get a call, somebody's asking for money, send me money, you don't even know who that person is. It's just lack of education on the part of the customer, and how they should safeguard themselves. So, and that needs a lot of campaigns, talking to people, educating them. That is how we can address that problem. Because when a customer loses money, they may have been naive in a certain way, but that constitutes a bad experience on their part, and they will. It's human nature. They will not blame themselves. They'll find somebody else to blame. But the end result is it's being associated with the service. So we want to educate our customers so that we reduce on such experiences, and the scope for increasing usage of our services will remain high. Thank you, George. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so now we reached the cornerstone of the presentation. What we're going through was really landscape. Now, our focus for many of the fintechs that we have, I think many of them are on payment services. So I will assume this cohort also will be that. We have a number of acts administered by the Bank of Zambia. First of all, we have the act that brings us into being as an institution, which is the Bank of Zambia Act. We have the National Payment Systems Act. We also have the Banking and Financial Services Act. We have other laws that support us also, which are listed there. Then we have directives and circulars, which now help us to implement various provisions of our acts. And then we are also part to a certain number of international standards. So let me now just step back and try to imagine that I'm a fintech and I want to be providing a payment service. If I want to be providing a payment service, it means most likely that service will be regulated under the National Payment Systems Act. If I want to be providing some form of a banking, maybe I want to establish a bank, then most likely that will fall under the bank, will be regulated mainly under the Banking and Financial Services Act. For the purposes of this webinar, we'll focus on the National Payment Systems Act. many of the steps that you go through are very similar. So once we do that, it will be easy to take through to speak to someone even on banking and other licenses, but we'll try and focus on the National Payment Systems Act. So if I'm an institution, if I'm a person who wants to start a fintech that offers payment services, first of all, what we usually advise is you have an idea, you want to know whether your service is regulated. First of all, when you're offering any payment service, maybe allowing people to send money from this person to another person, or maybe you are allowing people to buy Zesco to conduct bill payments, then or money transfer services. And in most cases, then you will need a license from the Bank of Zambia under the National Payment Systems Act. We license incorporated entities, meaning my name is Jimmy Kuvaras. I can't go get a license as Jimmy Kuvaras. So first of all, it must be an incorporated company, and the incorporation that you do at PACRA. So if I have a company, I'm calling now, I've registered with PACRA, and I have a company, I'm calling XYZ Limited. That XYZ Limited can then approach the bank to get a license to offer services that they will tell us they want to offer. What we usually advise is this: before you go to PACRA, because this is a regulated service, there's already a company on the market. There may be a company on the market called XY Limited. So we say before you go to PACRA, come to the bank, and then you usually ask that you write a letter to our director, Banking, Currency and Payment Systems, to check to get a name clearance, so that you are just sure that the name that you are proposing, company name or product name, that is not very similar to something that has already been given out by the bank or approved by the bank. And in that way, we don't cause confusion on the market. So if your company is already incorporated at the time you're thinking of, then maybe you can check and just check to see if it's there. But if you have not yet incorporated the company, it usually saves you time. You check with the bank, okay, is this name okay? And then you go and incorporate your company to check with the PACRA if that name is also available. That could save you valuable time. Once you get your name clearance, now you are ready, because your name is cleared. Now you are ready to apply to the bank for the license that you want. Under the current act, which is the National Payment Systems Act of 2007, there are 3 types of licenses. There's a payment system license, towards payment system license type 1, and there's a payment system business license. 3 words: payment system business license. And the third license category is payment system participant. A payment system participant. Let me just go through the 3 types of licenses. So a payment system business license. A payment system business license is a license you need if you are an organization that wants to offer money transfer services. Money transfer services. Let's say you want to offer money transfers, you want to transfer money from point A to point B. Someone can send money through an institution. Someone is in Livingstone, they can send money to someone who is in Ndola. That's a money transfer service. So such a service will fall under the license category called Payment System Business License. However, the Act left it general because we know that because of technology, the type of services that can come up are varied. So we say, and a payment system business is a money transfer service or anything else that the bank deems to be a payment system business. So they are a payment system business, or those institutions that are already on the market. You have organizations that offer money transfer services. You have Zoona, you have Airtel Money, you have MTN Money. All those fall under a payment system business license. Now the other category is a payment system. A payment system license. For a payment system license, okay, we can just remain there. Okay, thank you, George. For a payment system usually you don't usually see a payment system in the front end. Payment systems are usually in the back end. So payment systems are really like infrastructure or arrangements that allow financial service providers or businesses to transact with each other. They are not really front end. They are, you could call them infrastructure. Giving an example in this case would help. If you look at, let's take the example of Visa. Visa or MasterCard, the ones that we know. If I'm a customer of a bank, let's take UBA, and then I'm in Kabwe. Maybe there's no UBA in Kabwe, but I've got a Visa card. So I go to Visa, I go to an ATM that's available there. It could be an ATM of whichever bank is there. It could be Absa, it could be Zanaco. And I draw money on a Zanaco ATM. In the background, the bank that I've drawn money on and my bank, there's a system behind there, the Visa system, that allows to calculate, okay, how much money did your customers get from me? And they settle between each other. And that is provided by a payment system. In this case, that is provided by Visa. Previously, that used to be the case, but now there's even the national financial switch. So for local transactions, so Visa, in the example I've given, Visa is a payment system. For transactions, for now, because of change in regulations, now for local transactions, ATM and point of sale transactions, those will be routed through the national switch. So the national switch is also an example of a payment system. And there are rules behind in terms of how they'll settle transactions between each other, how they will deal with any dispute that can occur. All those are contained in payment system rules. So that's one category of another license, a payment system license. Now, for those organizations that participate in that payment system, those are the ones who are called payment system participants. So that completes the 3 types of licenses. Now let's go back to the licensing process. So now you have a company that you want to be offering, that you want to get a license to offer, whether you want to be a payment system business, a payment system participant, or a payment system itself. So there, then we encourage you to approach the Bank of Zambia with your product to arrange for an inquiry meeting, which is something you could think of it like what we are doing now, where we want to understand what product you want to offer to the market. And then depending on what you tell us, then we'll be able to determine which category of license you fall under, and we'll give you documents which are prepackaged, telling you the requirements, what you need to meet to be able to obtain that license. Those requirements are always readily available, and we send them to you. Now, if you've gotten your PACRA certificate of incorporation, it means you also have an articles of association. The main requirements that we usually want from applicants. You've checked that your name is acceptable with the Bank of Zambia, and you've also checked, because by law, PACRA also does name clearance, but for us, we do name clearance because this is a regulated sector, and we don't want confusion. You don't want to be mixed, names to be too similar between two institutions. So that is why we also do name clearance. So once you have done both of those, then you are ready. You have the certificate of incorporation. You are ready to apply for a license. There's a form that you fill in. We ask you, okay, who are the shareholders of this company? Who are your proposed senior managers? And who will be your directors? There are forms that those people should fill in. There are the directors questionnaire. There's a form called vital statistics. You need to give us a CV of those people, and the CV should have at least 3 references. And then you give us a certified ID of each of those people. So for personnel, we want to know the shareholders of the company. We want to know who serve in the senior management positions of that company, and also who will be the directors of that company. Once you have, so those are the documents that will now be contained in your application. Other things that will be contained in your application is a copy of the certificate of incorporation. We want proof to see, okay, is this company really in existence? Has it been incorporated by PACRA? We want to see your articles of association. At registration at PACRA, there's an articles of association that is there. So you give us a copy so that we see how do you intend to govern this entity that you have created, the rules of your entity. Once we get that, then we also ask you, describe to us what you want to offer. We want to get an understanding what your product will do, what sort of services do you intend to offer. Aside that, we want to see your risk management framework. With any endeavor, there are potential risks. So you want to be able to provide money transfer services for people. How will you ensure that your service is always up and running? How will you ensure that people are not turned away because there's no cash on your booths? How will you ensure that fraud is managed? How will you vet the people that work for you that they will not steal or they will not disclose sensitive data? So all those we want to see in as part of your application. Another thing that is important is on money laundering. You are providing a service where people will be coming to you. How will you identify that this person is indeed who they say they are? Before a customer, you get a customer onto your platform. How do you ensure that the customer is who they are? What customer identification documents will you accept? How will you verify the identity of those customers? If they're accessing a service via an app or web, how do you check? Do you have passwords? What sort of safeguards are there? So all those things. In case what systems that you are running, do you have, how do you continue in case your system for one reason or another is unavailable? How will you continue? How will you resume your services without much disruption to normal operations? So those are the questions that you should be able to, that information you should be able to provide as part of your application. So once you now provide us with that information, we'll check your application and see, okay, have they provided all the information that is requested for under this license category? In some cases, you find you may have missing information. Maybe we said you should give 3 referees, you haven't given. Maybe we asked for a certified certificate of incorporation, you find maybe the certificate of incorporation has not been certified. Then we write back to you and say, okay, we have seen this information you've provided, but some information is still lacking. We identify the information and ask you to give us that information. In some cases, an application may be so, it hasn't answered sufficient question for us to accept it. And such an application, because we know that it hasn't met, we usually tell the applicant to say, no, we cannot accept this application. We advise where the deficiencies are and ask you to resubmit. When you submit all the information, then we prepare a report and evaluate that report through within the bank. And if you then we'll make a recommendation and submit it it goes through the various approval levels. And once the report is finalized, if the recommendation is that you are to be given a license, the relevant department will make that recommendation. And there's a committee within the bank called the Licensing and Designation Committee. So that report, once, depending on the recommendation of the department that evaluated the application, that report will be presented to that committee, the Licensing and Designation Committee. If the licensing and designation committee will then sit, they will convene, and if the recommendation are accepted, then the recommendations will be taken to the designation officer, who is the deputy governor operations. If the licensing and designation committee does not agree with the recommendations of the department, or there may be some changes that they want, those would take the course accordingly. And the final decision is up to the designation officer, the deputy governor operations, who then makes the decision whether to give a license or not to give a license. And once that decision is made, the communication will be sent to the applicant. And there are also appeal processes in terms of where the applicant feels they've got some grievances or in some case, and then the applicant has those options to pursue. Thank you, George. We can move to the next slide. Okay. This slide basically is just about the transaction limits for mobile money, which were increased earlier this year as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and also increases in the usage of digital financial services to try and help people be able to use these services. I was able to see that there was a question of how long does licensing take. So if you submit an application when it is deemed complete, the Bank of Zambia has 90 days by law under the National Payment Systems Act, has 90 days in which to determine your application, meaning within 90 days, we must come back to you to tell you whether your application has been you have been given a license or you have not been given a license. So the period is 90 days. That's under the National Payment Systems Act. Under the Banking and Financial Services Act, the period should be about 180 days. I would encourage you also, because these are also pieces of regulation that actually it's public information. So you always advise there's the Banking and Financial Services Act and also the National Payment Systems Act. So those are always available. Okay, we can move to the next slide. I think that should be. Okay, just on fintech. On fintech, so there's a fintech team that's been established at the Bank of Zambia as a response to growing interest and growing number of fintechs in Zambia. And also just to mention here, what I've gone through is the licensing and designation process. However, the bank has noted that with growth in fintechs, the licensing process may, there's some new innovations that come. A licensed entity or somebody who is not licensed, they've got this brilliant idea which they want to try out. However, they may not be able to meet all the regulatory conditions. So they want to use they want to use a regulatory sandbox to test their product. So a regulatory sandbox really is you are offering a service where essentially, ideally, you should be licensed, but you are allowed by a regulator, in this case, Bank of Zambia. I know SEC also has something. Samantha, I think, was working with SEC with that. To try out. So you're trying out with actual customers. So these are live transactions, but you're being monitored, and then there are conditions given. So you could be given, let's say, okay, you want to try this service, and it must be for our, as it stands, for the Bank of Zambia, the intention is that the service that is being proposed should be a genuine or at least markedly different from what is already on the market, or otherwise then just get a license if it's something that is already on the market. The idea for the regulatory sandbox is so that the bank, we encourage innovation and don't, but while monitoring it, because you know that it could be risky since these are live transactions. So you don't want too much, you don't want any risk to materialize. It could be a new entity and it's a new service, so you want to monitor it closely and make sure things go right, and where if things go wrong, then you're quickly able to act upon that. So where are we with the regulatory sandbox? So the guidelines were drafted and taken to various stakeholders for input, and within the Bank of Zambia, they've been approved. So now these guidelines are with our legal team for clearance. So the plan is that anytime this should be issued to the market, but so just watch this space. Once these are issued, it's an avenue where if you have any new innovation, it's an avenue where you could start through regulatory sandbox, and then ideally then you get a license at some point, but at least it allows you to sort of move at a quicker space, at a quicker speed. We can get to the next slide. So the fintech team within the Bank of Zambia simply also is response. We are a regulator, and in many cases, the providers, you guys move at, you always a step ahead. So this is the response now to try and keep pace with that and monitor what is going on in the market so that we can be able to regulate effectively, and then equip ourselves with knowledge so that we also were able to safeguard the space properly and carry out a number of sensitizations and collaboration efforts. Thank you, George. We can move to the next slide. So what are the challenges and way forward? And I would encourage you, whenever you see a challenge that's being faced by a sector, there lies the opportunity. So the challenge that we see, customers still complain of high transaction costs, infrastructure in some rural areas, though in many cases that is, I think there's progress being made there. Consumer awareness, this continues to be a problem, and that is related to digital skills. People need to know how to safeguard themselves. Same way that people know how to keep their physical wallets, they should know that they need to safeguard their mobile money wallets and other digital financial services. And also, we need proper innovations. Copy and paste won't work. We need to understand what is it that people want here. If it is a farmer, what am I looking for? Am I looking for a product where I can put this and get something that speaks to my lifestyle? I think those who answer the needs of people. So the challenge is to you as innovators to design products that will speak to our needs, not copy what has worked somewhere else, but may not be relevant for our society. Can move to the next slide. So I think in conclusion, we know that fintechs are here to stay. And as a bank, we're doing our efforts to ensure that we are able to regulate, to carry out our mandate and be able to regulate the fintechs that come onto the market, not to stand as a roadblock. We know that really in increasing for the Bank of Zambia under its new strategic plan, the two pillars are financial inclusion and financial stability. And fintechs and digital financial services have been, it's well accepted that these are a game changer in increasing financial inclusion. So it's a sector that is that we need to look after and need to be harnessed so that we can all get the economy and the economy as a whole can benefit from what technology can do for us. I think that should be, we can go to the next slide. That should be the end. Yes, so that's the end of the presentation I prepared for you. So we can get to the possible questions that on things that I could have missed out or things that need clarifications on. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Jimmy. Your presentation was really comprehensive and insightful, and the comments reflect that. So I'm just going to pull out a few questions that have come in from the participants. One of them from Boyoti. You can just scroll here and find it. His question is licensing only to an LLC and place, or even a business partnership can acquire a license?
So licensing is to an incorporated entity. LLC, I think you mean limited liability company. So yes, it is to a certified, to an incorporated limited liability company. If you see, maybe I could just explain. For oversight purposes, if you remember, you're offering a regulated service. Let's say, for example, you're accepting people's money from, so people are trusting you to keep their money. But and when you if that license is given to an individual, how do you even oversee it? There are no controls in place. That is why this need to be, at least it's an institution that's got some rules and you can even follow. If you give your money to Jimmy tomorrow, I'll just find another rented house and you will not find me. So that's why such controls have to be put in place. It's not the other people could have arguments to increase financial inclusion into people, but it's important that we realize that it's a regulated space and there's need for sufficient safeguards and controls to be put in place.
Understood. Understood. There's a comment from Sampa saying thank you, and just commenting that your presentation was insightful and helpful to understand fintechs at a macro level from the regulatory perspective. There is another question from Boyoti asking how the bank defines a money circulation scheme and what makes it that different from a peer-to-peer lending platform.
Okay. That question is from whom?
From Boyoti.
Boyoti, okay. Okay, thank you, Boyoti. So a peer-to-peer lending where they are lending to, for a money circulation scheme, maybe let me start with that. When somebody comes to you and they say we put in this money and you will get a return of so much, but you do not see any underlying business as in where that money will really come from. So what a money circulation scheme really does is I come to a group of 10, I tell them put in 500 kwacha, and in 2 weeks you get maybe returns of ×2, ×3. And when you get those returns, you now become the agents who go to recruit other people because you have seen the rewards that have come your way. What that scheme is actually doing is using you. So now and you can even get second rewards, third rewards. But all they are doing is they are waiting for you. They can even be using their own money. So you start believing and you tell more people. And then when there are a number of deposits, a number of people that have come onto the scheme, now they've struck the funds that they wanted. So they could even have used their money to pay you, but their intention is that you recruit more people and you raise so much of money. Once then that amount of money is reached, and then you even stop seeing those people, and those returns cannot even be achieved because there was no business essentially there was no businesses essentially. And then the questions that should really be asked is, it's just a simple questions, not to be to discuss certain topics frankly is better, so that not to be greedy in a sense, because what sort of business will give you that return? So you just ask the basic questions, but how are you making this money? What sort of returns? Because for you to pay out returns, it means you're making more money than you are paying out. So what sort of business would be able to give you that source of return? So when you ask those basic questions, and once it doesn't make sense, just leave it. And usually your first instinct will tell you that, but for one reason or another, people want to believe in Father Christmas, especially during this period. It's very sad when you see somebody lose money for what they worked on because of such scams. And for she was comparing it to peer-to-peer lending. For a peer-to-peer lending that is actually licensed, what you see is then there's transparency. Somebody is borrowing from this person, and you actually know who you are borrowing from. But then you should also ask yourself, okay, for this service that you're providing, are you licensed to offer such a service? I would encourage you, and I think I'll probably send this to George. There's a paper that there's a circular that was done on this, and it does give some very good tips to rely on. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you, Jimmy. That was a comprehensive answer. We'll move on to, I see a question in the Q&A about the regulatory sandbox. So he's just asking about if they're in the process of submitting an application, how can they apply to be considered for a regulatory sandbox? And are there any other requirements other than the innovation itself?
Okay, so the requirements under the, remember the regulatory sandbox, I said it's been approved by the supervisory policy committee within the bank, but now it's awaiting legal clearance and sign off to the market. So it's not already in effect, but it's at an advanced stage. We're just waiting for legal clearance. So if I'm an entity, I have an innovation, but I know I may not meet all the requirements, then I would opt for the regulatory sandbox, because there the requirements are low. I want to test out. Because what that would do is it's an approval that it can only be granted for a certain period of time. You can't operate under it over. I think what should, if there will be no changes, then you can't operate it to be limited to a year and a maximum of 2 years. That is, if that will not be changed. So then it's a business decision on your end, and you analyze where are you as an organization. Okay, do we want to roll out and go out massive, or do we want to start small under the regulatory sandbox? Because the regulatory sandbox could tell you that, okay, no, because your innovation is like this, maybe we can't allow you to go to far-flung areas. We will allow you to operate in Lusaka so that we can monitor you closely, or you can't operate above certain transaction volumes. So as a business, then you need to be able to decide where you want to, which framework you want to use. Okay.
Thank you, Jimmy. Can you just touch on any other requirements for the regulatory sandbox, like the basic requirements?
So for a regulatory sandbox, okay, so still you need to have a certificate of incorporation, because again, it needs to be a company. And let me just emphasize the approach that was taken is that for regulatory sandbox, it can be used by both incumbents and prospective applicants. By that, I mean institutions that are licensed already, but want to try out an innovation, or institutions that are not licensed, but want to try out an innovation. So in this case, let me get for institutions that are not licensed, but they have this innovation that they want to try out the market. So get your certificate of incorporation. Also get your articles of association, and then we'll ask you who will be running this organization. We want to understand who your shareholders are and who will be running the entity. Because remember, I said these are still live transactions, so we want to know who the people behind this company are. In normal licensing, there are certain key positions like chief financial officer, the CEO, compliance officer, that we say you should tell us who hold these positions. But under the regulatory sandbox, we are not that strict. It will not prescribe that you should have this person. They were a bit relaxed depending on the nature there's some flexibility there depending on the nature of the product that you want to offer onto the market. And then another key thing was to, even under regulatory sandbox framework, we need a risk management framework. When you are operating, when you're introducing innovation, it may have various risks. How will you address those risks? So those are some of the requirements under the regulatory sandbox. They are much more relaxed when you compare it to full licensing. So then depending on the business strategy that you want to adapt as an applicant, you are able to determine, and we'll help guide you on which framework you want. But the decision ultimately should be up to you.
Understood. Thank you, Jimmy. More on licensing. Timothy is asking how long the licensing process takes. So I think from the initial inquiry meeting all the way up to when the decision is being made about approval or denial of a license.
Okay, so from the initial inquiry meeting, remember at the initial inquiry meeting, you haven't even submitted anything to us. And then even when you submit something to us, it may not be complete. And even when it's not complete, when we go into the details, there are some things we find there are things that are missing. So we only start counting the days at the time we consider that your application you've given us all the information we need. Then from that time, the bank has, by law, and under the National Payment Systems Act, we have 90 days in which to determine your application. So it's 90 days from the time the application is deemed complete.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. Another question in the Q&A from Jipego, asking a few questions actually. One, is there a cost to name clearance? And then is there a cost to submission on applications? We can start with those two.
Okay, I think my mistake there. How could I leave out the cost? Name clearance is free. There's no charge for name clearance. However, I think I need to emphasize this point. If you remember, I said PACRA does name clearance. By law, PACRA, for incorporation purposes, PACRA is the main body for name clearance, is the main agency for name clearance. However, note that the sector that you want to operate in is a regulated sector, which is regulated by the Bank of Zambia. And the other regulators, CCPC, ZICTA, and you've spoken about those, so you need to know whether you need to, whether your service will be, is one of those that's cross-cutting across various regulators. So PACRA is the main agency for name clearance. However, since you are entering a regulated sector, and because the Bank of Zambia does not want confusion between names of institutions or product names, we do name clearance. So you check, okay, you want to be called XYZ Limited. Then you come to the Bank of Zambia. Okay, is XYZ Limited available? Okay, it's not available. Then you suggest another name. Okay, is ABC Limited? Can we use it? Okay, the Bank of Zambia says it's okay. Then you go to PACRA. Okay, can I use ABC here? PACRA tells you that ABC is not available, meaning you must come back to the Bank of Zambia and say, okay, no, we want to use ABE. If ABE is okay at the Bank of Zambia, you go to PACRA and ABE is available, then you proceed. Then you can incorporate that company. So you just need, because what happens sometimes is someone goes to PACRA, this has happened before, they register a company and then they come to the Bank of Zambia and they see that, no, that name is not acceptable to the bank. And the end result is they have to start changing names at PACRA. So you just have to, and with technology these days, I think PACRA does offer, so just need to be tactical in how you make sure that the name is acceptable at both ends. Then on cost, remember I said there are various types of licenses. So for a payment system business license, we have very, very low fees. For a payment system business license, the application fee is 1,000 kwacha. For a payment system business, it's 1,000 kwacha, and for a payment system itself, it is 1,500. And for a payment system participant, it should be 1,500 as well.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. 2 follow-up questions from Chipego again. If the product or service I'm providing falls in more than one of the 3 types of systems that require licensing, is it correct to assume I need to acquire all 3 licenses?
Under the current law, as it is right now, you would it would almost look like you need all the 3 licenses. However, we have a new bill, we are revising the act to sort of align so that if you have one license already, it's sort of it doesn't need to go through all the processes, but institutions can have more than one license type. You can be a participant in a payment system. You can also be providing a payment system business. So it's really up to you.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the final question from Chipego: if a customer is using their service to transfer money from their mobile money wallet to a third party, whether it's a bank account or another third party, do they need a license?
Just go through that question again, Samantha.
So Chipego says, if a customer is using their service to transfer money from a mobile money wallet to a respective bank account, do they need licensing for that service?
Okay, it's okay. Okay, let's see if from what you're reading, it sounds it sounds like a customer.
A payment switch. Yeah, it sounds like a payment switch.
Yeah, if I'm maybe Chipego, you could just help us with clarifying that question. But if I'm a customer of Airtel Money and I'm moving money, I'm just a customer. I don't need a license. But if it's switching or something that you need a license, maybe you could just clarify that question and we could address it more effectively.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, there's a few comments. Walia says it was a really interesting presentation. Mukopaje says they love the idea of the sandbox. Chando says it was a well-elaborated and comprehensive presentation. Thank you. Then a question from Sampa. Can one register a financial cooperative through the district council and still be eligible to register for a fintech license from BoZ?
Can one register a financial cooperative?
Mm-hmm. Under the district council and then still be eligible to register for a fintech license under BoZ?
Okay, that's a good one. So far, what we've dealt with is under requirements, you need to be an incorporated entity. So I have not seen any cooperative. So cooperatives, I do not think so. But I would have to inquire with my colleagues, but I do not think so, because the requirements specifically state that you need to be an incorporated entity. So for an entity falling under the cooperative and societies, I don't think so. I highly doubt.
Okay. A question from Facebook from Musonda Kapaya. Firstly, he says, thank you for a very nice presentation. Then his question is there a mechanism of following up cyber fraud? If so, what is the trend with fintechs? What specific initiatives can be put in place by the central bank to assist with reducing in cyber fraud?
Okay. So fraud is one of issues that the bank has also seen has the impact of reversing the quite impressive trend that we've seen in the growth of digital financial services, because it negates the efforts that have hitherto been made. One of the things that that the bank is doing is encouraging sharing of knowledge between entities. Because what happens with fraud, it could be either let me give the example of an agent fraud. If I'm an agent and I'm with this provider and I commit fraud there, if that provider then removes me and then I move to another agent, it's like I'm just being kept in the system and just committing fraud where I go. However, if there's sharing of information, then that helps identify those type of agents. And then is it early this year or last year, with there's the Payment System Association of Zambia, and this is like an umbrella body for the various payment service providers in Zambia. The idea behind the formation of this association so that it acts as a self-regulatory body that oversees common issues that are being faced by various entities, and that's where issues of fraud are being discussed so that they can then be addressed as an industry, and then the sharing of information. Because remember, this is an interconnected world. A hack on one system sort of opens up to everybody. A disease that began in China, and we are so far, we were just watching on TV, and now we've almost the entire 2020 has just gone. So it's important that everybody is safeguarded for the system to operate effectively. So the point there is that it has to be safeguarded as a war, otherwise we are all at risk. So the efforts there, the issues of awareness, upskilling people, making sure we sort this out as a group, and if there's any faults, we share knowledge. Those are quite important in fighting cyber fraud. And then there are task forces even at national level to try identify, okay, where is this happening and how can this be addressed? And that is why, as a bank, even before we get a license, we want to see what controls are in place. Okay, if you are connected, if we connect you to this system, have you carried out tests to ensure that you cannot, do you do penetration testing? Before you connect to any other system, do you do tests to ensure that how you envisage that this service operates is indeed how it's operating, or other people will try out something and expose your organization? So those are all important tools that are being used, and that is why licensing is quite important, because at that entry stage, if we get it right, then you reduce the risk at later stages.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm aware of time. We're at 12:28 and we are scheduled to go until 12:30. So I want to ask from you if we can extend by 10 to 15 minutes, if you're okay with that, just to address a few of the remaining questions.
We're just doing our jobs. Sure.
All right. Thank you. Firstly, I think if Chipeko can clarify in under 1 minute her question. I think you have been given access to audio, Chipeko. So please go ahead if you're online.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
hear you.
Yes,
you're audible.
Great. Thank you so much for the information. It's been very needed. So basically, I was just asking if my service, which I've built, is acting as a conduit pipe of sorts. where I'm transferring money, or my client is transferring money through me to their bank account or to a bank account? Do I need a licensing?
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Pego, for that clarification. Yeah, because you are now an interface and you are now part of the transfer process. You do need a license, because the danger there is you can think of yourself as a conduit, but from a regulatory perspective, we are supervising the national payment system, and the money transfer is a component of that. So anywhere where the system breaks, it means the system failed. So if we are to regulate the national payment system, we need to have oversight of the entire thing. So since you're part of that chain, then you most likely need a license. But we always check everything so that we see. But from the description that you've given just now, you definitely need a license because you're a part of that chain.
All right, thank you.
Great. This is the final question from the chat, and then I'll move into the Q&A box. Someone is asking, Christian is asking how they can set up an inquiry meeting with Bank of Zambia.
Okay. So what I'll do after this meeting is we have officers who handle the designation processes. There's Akavivwa Akalimukwa and Maureen Mulenga at the Bank of Zambia. What I'll do, I'll send their numbers as well as their email addresses. I don't know. I'll send them either to George or Samantha, and those can be shared with the team. So
Thanks.
you simply write them an email or you give them a call, and then you can set up a meeting. And with virtual, it means most of the meetings now we do them virtually. So then they'll give you a date and time, and you discuss with them.
Okay, that'll be helpful. Thank you, Jimmy. Tressford is asking, can a business keep acquiring customers as it awaits the license after submitting an application?
If you do that, you are already breaking the law, because under the National Payment Systems Act, you cannot provide a payment service without being licensed or approved by the Bank of Zambia. So you need to wait for you to offer that service to members of the public. Once you're acquiring customers, you're offering the service, then you need approval, licensing from the bank before you can do that. You can be developing in the background, but you can't offer it to members of the public.
Understood. Chipeko is asking if there are any costs attached to participation in the regulatory sandbox.
It's not yet. It wouldn't be very much, because the idea is to encourage innovation. I did speak about the World Bank report and the things that it praised us on, and also some challenges that it identified. One of them was digital entrepreneurship, that very few people are. You find it's foreign companies that are coming to offer digital related services. So there's no much activity there, and also lack of digital skills by our members. So the idea is to make the fee as low as possible. It could even be, and then there has to be a small fee, because otherwise it can create a mess. Or you want people who are truly eligible to come into there, so there has to be, but it will be a very minimal fee.
Understood. And a follow-up question to that, still related to the sandbox, is whether the sandbox will be connected to the national switch.
That's a very good question. Okay. So then the national switch is for. So far, the national switch has been used for commercial banks, as well as payment service providers who are providing mobile payments. And maybe I just need also, for those that may not be aware of the national switches. You see, previously, I had given the example, if I'm an ABSA customer and I want to draw money on an ATM for Zanaco, those transactions were being enabled by Visa. Now, with the national financial switch, it means those transactions are being enabled by the national financial switch. So that is for all ATMs and the point of sale transactions, as well as mobile payments. So now all those service providers can speak to each other, and you can now send money directly from your wallet to a bank, or you can deposit in your bank via an agent and such services. So those are enabled through the national switch. For those entities that come into under the regulatory sandbox framework, if they already have a license, then there's no problem. But I guess his question is for those that are not licensed. It's something we need to, that is something that will probably be determined. But I don't think at this early age that would be the way to go, because remember, the national switches, you are dealing with a number of entities and then you are just testing your product. But it's something that I'll pick up from this discussion, and also I'll take to my superiors for discussion. But maybe early on it could be, remember we said the regulatory sandbox is sort of, you have conditions, you can't go above a certain number of transactions, but then the question then will come, how do you expect me to try out if I'm not connected to this key infrastructure? So it's a good question, and I'll pick it up, and I think it's a good discussion point, Samantha, probably that you could pick up also and follow us on as an action point from this.
Yes, very well noted. Thank you, Jimmy. A question from Chimonia. What are the factors that would lead to revocation of an entity's license and the procedure that follows?
So really, I think the main thing to follow is, it could be maybe an entity is being wound up for whatever reason. Or maybe there's a court case to wind it up, or the bank, there's some risk that the bank has determined that, or the entity itself says they no longer want to provide this service and they want to surrender their license. So or maybe they've breached some regulation and their license being revoked because of that breach.
Okay, and there's a question, the last part of the question is asking about the procedural guidelines to ensure a free and fair hearing before a license is revoked.
Okay, the Act does always provide for an appeal process. So when the Bank of Zambia makes a decision, whether, okay, at that point the licensed entity still has ways in which it could appeal that decision, and those provisions under the current Act, you will not find those provisions, but in a bill that's been drafted by the bank, and hopefully the intention is that at some point this should be replace the current Act. Those guidelines are provided for in there.
Okay. Blessed had a similar question to Chipego's about fund transfer between mobile money to a bank and vice versa. So I think that one has been answered. Then there's a question from Facebook. Does Bank of Zambia accept or regulate the use of cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange in Zambia?
Okay. So there's a Bank of Zambia actually issued a press statement some time back where that issue was addressed. The main message of the press statement was just to note that there are some risks associated with the cryptocurrency. The legal tender in Zambia under the Bank of Zambia Act is the kwacha, and he issued the the only institution that's been vested with the powers to issue the kwacha is the Bank of Zambia. So the Bank of Zambia does not regulate cryptocurrency, but it issued a cautionary statement to say there are risks associated with dealing in such. So if anyone is to do such, they should be made aware of those risks.
Okay, and then a question from Mukapaje, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Is the Sandbox capable of providing a test environment besides the live one, a space that could route dummy transactions?
The reason somebody's getting approval, remember you're designing a product and you want people to try it out. The reason you're getting approval is you want to offer it to members of the public. For test transactions, like you're developing behind the system, wherever somebody could be developing from, and you're not offering to members of the public, that's not within scope. That seems to be like a developmental stage, really. Under the Sandbox, we're looking at transactions that actually ready for live testing. So you're ready to try this out to the market. The questions, unless I haven't picked it up correctly, the question seems sort of like it's an early stages. You're still designing. You're just trying out. So you're sort of in the background. It's not even towards. You're not even ready to try it out to members of the public.
Agreed. That, I think, is our last question. There was another question from Boyoti, but it seems similar to the question Shipego was asking about fund transfer between different wallets or accounts. So I think that one has been addressed. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jimmy, for taking the time. Something has just popped up in my Q&A. One last one. Okay, I'll just read this one as is, or Chipeko, if you still have audio access, I think you can just make it a little bit more concise.
Okay, I do now. Hi again. So I was listening to everything you were saying, Jimmy, about the payment switch and the need for licensing, right? So maybe just to be more direct, we've got a person who's my client, right? And this person is trying to transfer, let's say, 10 kwacha from their mobile money account to their bank account, or to their bank account, basically. But then I with my service, I'm registered legally, incorporated legally, and I'm an agent, maybe also as an Airtel provider, an MTN provider, Zamtel, and Kazang also. So this customer is really just transacting, say, from point A to my agent account, and then we from the agent account are probably crediting the customer's bank account. Because we are registered, the agents, the telecoms themselves are registered, right? Why then do we also need to get independent licensing when we're not really reinventing the wheel, or like developing any other technology that would really feed into that payment system? I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect that's where my other two attendees are coming from.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sorry about disturbance. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you for that. For an agent, remember, an agent, if I'm an agent of Airtel, I'm only providing those services through the extension of that license, that authority. So Airtel authorizes me to be an agent for them. So the services I'm offering, I'm really relying that Airtel has.
Sorry, Jimmy, I
So
think we just missed the last 10 or 15 seconds or what you were saying.
Okay. So I'm saying when an agent is providing a payment service, they're really relying on the license of the principal. So for example, an Airtel Money license. So in providing those services, if a customer comes to an agent and then they want to withdraw money and deposit and then send that money to a bank account through that same agent, the agent does not need the license. They are using the platforms and tools provided by their principals. So in that case, if it's an agent carrying out that service, then they wouldn't need a license. However, if the idea is that there's another switch independent or another two independent of those services and within the framework of the agency or within the scope of the agency framework, then that means that service would need licensing. However, if it's under those agency services, then the license, they will rely on the license obtained by the principal, like Airtel Money or any other service provider. I don't know whether that's clear.
Yes, it is very clear, actually. So I think similarly, what you're trying to say is that it also applies, for instance, if I register as an agent with a deposit-taking institution, then it equally applies?
Yes. If you're an agent, it applies. You can provide those services within that agreement. Remember, the agreement, there's an agreement that you sign, agency agreement that you sign with a principal. You can provide those services that are allowed within that agreement. If you go beyond and then you start using your own platforms, then you would be breaching the law. But when you're providing payment services through an agent, agents don't need a license. They rely on the license obtained by the principal, and then the principal, we give obligation on the principal to monitor those agents, and we as the Bank of Zambia in some cases do actually move in to do direct supervision and monitoring of those agents. But the obligation is on the principal to ensure that the agent is operating in line with all the regulations and license conditions that are given to the service provider.
Great. Thank you so much. That's very clear.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much once again, Jimmy. We really appreciate your time, your presentation, and how you've concisely responded to all the questions. Thank you also to the participants. Your questions were very insightful and on point, and I think it shows that the market in general there's some what's the word I'm looking for, cohesiveness. I hope that's the right word, but essentially that the regulator and the market are on the same page. There are no other questions. I think we're done with the Q&A. So just again to reiterate, thanks for your time, for your expertise, and we hope we can call on you again, Jimmy, in future. And also we'll look out for the contact information for the officers that handle the designation process, just so we can share that or we can distribute that within our networks as well.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. We're always available, and thank you, everyone.
All right. We'll end the meeting here and look forward to future.
All right. See you.
Cheers.